Uh, Rob.
Good evening. I'm Kevin Ahern, Chair of the Town Planning and Zoning Commission, and I'd like to welcome you to tonight's virtual meeting. For the record, I'd like to note that the required meeting agenda and the application materials are all available on the town website. Because in-person attendance at public meetings is likely to increase the risk of transmission of COVID-19, this hearing is being conducted in accordance with Governor Lamont's Executive Order number 7B and 7I. Will the town planner please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Todd DeMay. For the record, Commissioner Bankhurst.
Here.
Commissioner Gomes. For the record, I'll note that she is absent. Commissioner Gillette.
Here.
Commissioner O'Donnell. For the record, I'll note that he is absent. Commissioner Prestige.
Here.
And Mr. Chairman, Ahern.
Present.
And Todd DeMay, Town Planner, is here. That is the roll.
Thank you, Mr. DeMay. This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. For the record, I'd like to note that we have a quorum of the Commission. So Commission members and town staff are participating via WebEx. Members of the public can view the meeting live on West Hartford Community Television or on West Hartford Community Interactive Comcast Channel 5 and Frontier TV Channel 6098 or at www.whctv.org. The meeting is also being recorded for on-demand viewing, which will be available on the town website. Because of the virtual format of this meeting, there are some special rules and procedures that I need to cover before I begin. First, I ask all participants to please mute the microphones on your devices when you are not speaking. Second, pursuant to Executive Order 7B, all speakers must state their name and title each time they speak. Also, I will ask members of the Commission and staff not to direct other participants directly. Comments and requests for information must be made through the chair. After you state your name, simply preface your question or comment with "through the chair." And when you are done, I will recognize the person who is most appropriate to respond. Although these practices may feel rigid and awkward, they ensure the meeting is conducted in an orderly fashion and that members of the public who are listening can understand the discussion. I would like to conclude by thanking everyone in advance for your patience. We're getting better at this. This is our 4th virtual public meeting, but there's bound to be some glitches along the way. However, we remain committed to the principles of open and transparent government. So with that, will the town planner please proceed with the first matter on our agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Todd DeMay. For the record, the first matter on our agenda this evening is the approval of meeting minutes. The first set of meeting minutes are the minutes of the special CIP meeting of Monday, May 4th, 2020.
Okay, I'd like to note that on this, every member present will be seated. So for item 1A, we'll entertain a motion for this item.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Binkhorst. We require no second. Is there any discussion on these minutes? Seeing none,
Aye.
let me try your minds. Mr. Dumais, will you please take the roll?
Commissioner Binkhorst,
Yay.
Commissioner Gillette,
Yay.
Commissioner Prestige,
Aye.
and Mr. Chairman Ahern.
Aye.
For the record, that was 4 ayes, and the minutes were passed unanimously. The next item on our agenda, approval of meeting minutes for the regular meeting Monday, May 4th.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. So for May 4th, can you just confirm that everyone will also be seated on this item?
That is, Mr. Chairman, that is correct. All members present at tonight's meeting are eligible to vote on this item.
Thank you. Again, this is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. All right, so for this item, I will entertain a motion.
Commissioner Binkhorst, I'll make a motion to approve.
This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. Thank you, Commissioner Binkhorst. Any discussion on this item? Seeing none, let me try your minds. Mr. Dumais, please take the roll.
Commissioner Binkhorst,
Aye.
Commissioner Gillette,
Aye.
Commissioner Prestige,
Aye.
and Mr. Chairman Ahern.
Aye.
For the record, I will note that that is unanimous approval of the meeting minutes of Monday, May 4th for the regular meeting, 4-0. The next item on our agenda are the approval of meeting minutes for the special meeting Wednesday, May 13th. Mr. Chairman, for clarification purposes, the members eligible to vote on these minutes are yourself, Commissioner Gillette, and Commissioner Binkhorst.
This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. Thank you, Mr. Dumais. So the minutes of the special meeting held on May 13th. I'll entertain a motion on this item.
Commissioner Binkhorst, I'll make a motion to approve.
This is Chairman Kevin Ahern again. Thank you very much, Commissioner Binkhorst. Any discussion on this item? Okay, seeing none, let me try our minds. Mr. Dumais, please take the roll.
Commissioner Binkhorst,
Aye.
Commissioner Gillette,
Aye.
Mr. Chairman Ahern.
Aye.
For the record, the special meeting of Wednesday, May 13th minutes were approved unanimously, 3-0.
Okay, this is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. Next up is communications. Item number 2, Mr. Dumais.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On this item on our agenda is a communication from the University of St. Joseph requesting an extension of time to comply with condition number 2 of special use permit number 1337. In your meeting agenda information, I provided the letter from Rona Free, president of University of St. Joseph, and also your condition permit for special use permit 1337. And you'll see that condition number 2 was use of the temporary dining hall annex shall cease by January 31st, 2020, and all disturbed areas on the site shall be fully restored by July 1st, 2020. So the request before you seeks an extension of time to make the full restoration of that area. They're no longer using that dining hall, but they need additional time to restore that area. And you can see it's a gravel base of about 4,000 square foot. And you'll see the other information. So they're just asking for the commission to consider more time.
This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. Thank you, Mr. Dumais. Do any of the members of the commission have any questions for Mr. Dumais on this item? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Dumais, Mr. Prestige, please.
Sure. Kevin Prestige, Commissioner. Mr. Dumais, a question about the current condition of the site right now. It's my understanding that it's currently gravel, sediment and erosion controls are in place. One could characterize it as stable. Is that true?
Commissioner Prestige, through the chair to you. That is correct. That's a correct assessment. The site is stable, and there isn't a concern with soil and erosion controls. And most of the disturbed area now is gravel, compacted gravel, and or bituminous, some form of bituminous concrete.
Thank you, Mr. Prestige. This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. Mr. Dumais, just a point of order question. So would the nature of the motion on this be a motion to approve?
Mr. Chairman, this is Mr. Dumais. Yes, there would be a motion to accept the communication, thereby approving their request for extension of time. I suppose you could impose a new amount of time that you're granting. But the motion before you would be at least to accept the communication to approve additional time.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. So the request on the table is to extend the deadline in this for a year to July of 20. I'm sorry, could we just confirm? So the extension would be through when, Mr. Dumais?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Dumais, it would be a 12-month extension of the deadline. So it's in the last full paragraph of their application. They're requesting a 12-month extension.
Mr. Dumais, this is Kevin Ahern again. Just to clarify, the actual request in the last paragraph, it says we request a 12-month extension for restoration until June 30th, 2020. Is this supposed to read 2021?
Mr. Chairman, this is Mr. Dumais. Yes, that's a typo. It should be 2021. So the rest of the letter is accurate. And then when they ask for that 12-month extension, that will take them to June 30th, 2021.
Okay, this is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. Thank you, Mr. Dumais, for that clarification. Just so everybody understands that it would be a 12-month extension to June 30th, 2021. Do we have any questions for Mr. Dumais? Okay, seeing none, then I will entertain a motion on this item.
I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Prestige. This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. We have a motion to approve. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, let me try your minds. Mr. Dumais, please take the roll.
Commissioner Pinkhurst.
Aye.
Commissioner Gillette.
Aye.
Commissioner.
Mr. Dumais, if you're waiting for me, it got cut off. I didn't hear a name.
Yeah, Commissioner Prestige. You're
Sure. Aye.
Mr. Chairman Ahern.
Aye.
With that, Mr. Chairman, that request for an extension of time for condition number 2 of special use permit 1337 from the University of St. Joseph was unanimously granted.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. Again, this is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. Okay, next item up is new business. Item number 3, Mr. Dumais.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 9 Tolls Road, +1 Defense Systems application SUP 1357 of Darren Reisler, record owner, requesting approval of a special use permit for an indoor recreation or amusement facility for a mobile indoor shooting range. The application proposes the installation of a mobile gun range approximately 8 feet by 48 feet long to be docked at the back of the existing building at 9 Tolls Road. Submitted for TPC receipt on June 1st. Suggest required public hearing be scheduled for July 6th.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. Again, this is Kevin Ahern again. So this is a SUP. It is a required public hearing. The recommended date is at our next regular meeting. Do we have any questions for Mr. Dumais on this item? Mr. Prestige.
Commissioner Prestige, Mr. Chairman, through you to Mr. Dumais, a question about the review process for this. Mr. Dumais, I believe that police, fire, your code compliance team, and the health district will be looking at this application at some point. Is that true?
Through you, Chair, to Mr. Commissioner Prestige. Yes, that is accurate. In addition to those entities that you referenced, also the fire marshal will receive this on referral, as will the public works folks, the director of public works. That's our typical review coordination with all of the pertinent staff divisions. So that is correct.
Okay, this is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. Do we have any other questions on this item? Mr. Dumais, just one thing from me. I know this is an industrial zone, very industrial zone, but there are 2 residential properties on either side of the +1 facility. And so if you could just clarify, what are the notification requirements for the abutting neighbors?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Dumais. Our normal notification requirements for a special use permit require a notice in the newspaper, in addition, a sign to be posted on the property, and we notify direct abutting property owners. However, under Executive Order 7I, those notification requirements have been truncated to permit essentially a posting, legal notice on the website, and also a sign on the property. But we've been notifying direct property abutters anyway because we have the staff resources to do so. So we'll adhere to all of our normal practices. So those 2 properties, since they are direct abutting properties, will get notice of the application.
This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. Thank you, Mr. Dumais. I just wanted to check on that. All right, do we have any other questions for Mr. Dumais? All right, we'll entertain a motion on this item. Ms. Gillette.
I move we set for public hearing, July 6th.
Thank you, Ms. Gillette. This is Kevin Ahern again. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, let me try our minds. Mr. Dumais, please call the roll.
Commissioner Binkhurst.
Aye.
Commissioner Gillette.
Aye.
Commissioner Prestige.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman Ahern.
Aye.
With that, Mr. Chairman, the matter was set for public hearing at our regularly scheduled meeting on July 6th, 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. This is Kevin Ahern again. All right, so next up would be old business, but however, we have no public hearings for this meeting, so we're going to move right to the town council referrals. First up is item number 5. Mr. Dumais.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is 1502 New Britain Avenue, application filed on behalf of West Farms Mall LLC, owner of property located at 1500 and 1502 New Britain Avenue, also known as the West Farms Mall. It is within Special Development District number 12. The application seeks permission to undertake exterior facade renovations to the tenant space just north of the easterly facing mall entrance for a Maggie McFly's restaurant, including associated signage, landscaping, and parking modifications. In addition, the application seeks permission for outdoor dining to be permitted as an approved accessory use for all restaurants within the Special Development District. Town Council public hearing scheduled for June 23rd. So this application, for those of you that maybe didn't understand the description and the notice there, it's where the old Ruby's Tuesdays tenant space used to be. So that entrance to the mall is more or less on the Farmington town border. It's at that location. So the application materials were sent out to you and posted on our website, include facade renovations. Those facade renovations in and of themselves will trigger the Special Development District amendment application process because they exceed the administrative approval authority. There are some slight signage waivers in terms of size being requested as part of that. And there's some minor associated landscaping and parking modification changes. In addition, there is contemplated outdoor dining area. You should see that in your application materials. But remember, when we have a special development district that has not previously requested outdoor dining to be an accessory permitted use within the district proper, it's a 2-step process. So first, the mall is asking for any future locations within the special development district to be authorized for outdoor dining under their special development district application. And then they'd have to come back, if approved, for a special use permit with the Planning and Zoning Commission at a future date. So this just sets that process up if successful. This has gone through staff review. There are no outstanding staff technical concerns or issues with this application. Last Thursday evening, it went to our Design Review Advisory Committee. You don't have a communication item because it hasn't been prepared because they went just last Thursday. DRAC unanimously recommended approval of this application. There was a formal review session. In addition, they were also an informal study session with the applicant. So DRAC looked very heavily at the signage and the facade, and they favorably made a recommendation on this application. They thought it would help to enliven that rather large concrete stark area of the mall, as it were. In addition, the outdoor dining was well received by our Design Review Advisory Committee. With that, that's my brief summary and overview, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that the commission may have.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. Do we have any questions for Mr. Dumais on this item? This is the West Farms item. Seeing no questions, yes, this is actually very straightforward and uncomplicated. So if we have no questions on this item, then we can move right to a vote on this. So the nature of this vote would be a motion to recommend approval to the Town Council. Do we have a motion on this item? Ms. Gillette?
We vote on recommendation of approval of this item. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Gillette. This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. All right, so we have the motion. We do not need the second on this item. Any discussion on this item? Ms. Gillette?
I think I would have had a very different attitude towards this 20 years ago. As we talked about in the POCD, with the changing retail landscape and the changing attitudes towards turning businesses towards the street as opposed to insularly inside. I think this kind of an adaptation to what had been, when it was constructed, purely a fortress, a self-contained fortress, that these kinds of proposals for the mall are a good way of better integrating an insular property into the surrounding communities and providing alternatives to retail, which help with viability.
This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. Ms. Gillette, I agree wholeheartedly. Actually, that's a very nice way to put it. This is a nice application. Okay, so if there's no further discussion, then Ms. Gillette has put the motion on the table. Then let's try your minds. Mr. Dumais, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Binkhurst.
Aye.
Commissioner Gillette.
Aye.
Commissioner Prestige.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman Ahern.
Aye.
With that, Mr. Chairman, the Planning and Zoning Commission, by way of unanimous vote, recommends approval to the Town Council for a Special Development District number 12 application amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. Again, this is Kevin Ahern, Chair. All right, so next up is item number 6. Mr. Dumais.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 1126 1148 New Britain Avenue. Application filed on behalf of Har Associates LLC, owner of property located at 1126 and 1148 New Britain Avenue, known as the Elmwood Shopping Center or the Elmwood Plaza. It's within Special Development District number 3. The application seeks permission to undertake exterior facade renovations to convert and create new tenant space within the existing building footprint, requests modification to current parking restrictions, and seeks permission for outdoor dining to be permitted as an accessory use for the entire Special Development District. Town Council public hearing scheduled on June 23rd. Much like the previous referral from the council for the West Farms Mall, this is a commercial shopping plaza. It's actually the designation of our Special Development District numbers indicate what number Special Development District it is. So you'll see that this is number 3. It is one of our oldest special development districts in town. And the application materials before you you can see that they're trying to carve out some tenant space that was the back of former retail space. Immediately, what is now Pepe's Restaurant, immediately behind that, they're trying to create out a new tenant space. In the application materials you'll see there, they're calling it a Symmetry Physical Therapy. They're looking to get a physical therapy office in that and create a new facade, a new entrance to carry the existing facade that is around the corner at Frank Pepe's, carry that over on what currently is a blank wall on the shopping plaza. So that'll help to activate that side of the plaza a little bit. In addition, they're requesting, since they're before the council, they're asking for outdoor dining to be an approved accessory use throughout the entire plaza. Any restaurants looking to take advantage of that don't have an outdoor dining permit would have to come back with an application to this special use permit to the Planning and Zoning Commission in the future. And lastly, they're asking for some parking waivers or modifications really to the existing parking restrictions. When you do the math on the conversion of that tenant space, there's an overall deficiency in their parking program based on the old restrictions. And what the applicant is essentially asking to do is for them to be treated like any other property in the BC zone. Our BC zone, which is our central business district, we have two BC zones in town. So West Hartford Center and Elmwood Center, both BC zone. There are provisions in that parking standards where if you're changing an allowable use in that zone and not creating new square foot building areas, so you're not building new building, but just reutilizing existing space within a building, you don't have to provide for any additional parking. So in effect, that's what they're asking for their treatment to be within the special development district. To help support that request, they did submit a parking study that has been reviewed by town staff, and I don't think there are any issues with the parking report as prepared. So really that's their application for amendment to this SDD in a nutshell. And I'd be happy to answer any further questions.
Thank you, Mr. DeBay. This is Kevin Hearn, the chair again. Do we have any questions on this item? Mr. Prestige.
Commissioner Prestige, Mr. Chairman, through you, question about these changes and the effects on abutters. Mr. Dumais, if you could just perhaps summarize any outreach to the abutters, and then any potential concerns that you may have had and reviewed and worked on with the applicant with regards to, say, lighting from new signage. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, through you to Commissioner Prestige. Two questions. So in the neighborhood outreach material, in the applicant's application, there is a section on neighborhood outreach. This predates their actual outreach efforts. So they're going to meet with the Elmwood Business Association to discuss the overall concept. In addition, they're going to offer immediate abutting property owners that same opportunity. So any concerns should be raised through that process. I forgot to mention when I provided my overview that much like the last application, this did go to our Design Review Advisory Committee last week and received unanimous favorable recommendation for approval. The design review folks thought that the activation of that currently blank wall on the facade is a big improvement and benefit to the plaza. During that discussion, the issue of signage for that new tenant space that's being carved out came up, and the property owner said that they have no intent to illuminate that sign. They want to keep the illuminations levels low on that side of the building because they are cognizant that is the closest point of the plaza to the residential community at Quaker Green immediately to the north. And we haven't heard anything from the abutting property owners to this point.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. Again, this is Kevin Hearn, chair again. Do we have any follow-up from Mr. Prestige or any questions from the other commissioners on this item? Okay, so you pointed it out, Todd, but I just reemphasize that for anyone listening at home, for the one person listening from home, this is not we would not be approving outdoor dining here. We would just be approving a special development district that would allow such thing, but it would have to come back to us via an SUP. Did I get all that correct, Mr. Dumais? Okay, Mr. Dumais is nodding yes. So good. All right. So the nature of this would be the same as the last one then. It will be a motion to recommend approval to the town council. Ms. Gillette?
I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval to the town council.
This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. Thank you, Ms. Gillette. Do we have any discussion on this item? Mr. Prestige?
Commissioner Prestige, I'll be supporting recommendation of approval on this item. I think that investing in this part of the community, Elmwood, specifically this district, this one STD, this one site is wonderful. They've done some work with Peppies in the past, and they continue to invest. It's needed. That it came through DRAC, and DRAC is in support of it is wonderful too for the community and hopefully the success of the site. I would just add that an approval that we provide would certainly be pending a supportive response from any sort of community outreach. Thank you.
This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. Thank you, Mr. Prestige. Ms. Gillette?
I agree with what Mr. Prestige said, and would also like to add that similarly to the previous recommendation, updating older retail areas, I think is critically important to their continued health and expansion and prosperity. Outdoor dining in this area could be quite successful right next to a good deal of residential into updating it. And as far as the parking waivers go, I can't, I've never seen that parking lot filled, ever close to filled. And I am happy to waive adding more. And if the outdoor dining should like to expand into some of the parking areas, I would be very interested in hearing what they had to say about that. And I recommend approval.
Thank you, Ms. Gillette. Again, this is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. Any further comment on this item? All right, seeing none. Yeah, I think this looks great. I really enjoyed watching this shopping center's evolution in the time that I've been here. I'm always on the emails for the Elmwood Business Association, and they definitely take care of their area. So I would definitely will vote for this. Mr. Dumais, you have a question?
Just a comment, Mr. Chairman, with your permission. I would like to point out, I think it was stated in the last application, but this is also consistent with our recently adopted Plan of Conservation and Development. I think Commissioner Gillette used a slightly different term about the updating older retail is imperative, or it's important, and we certainly call out that in the economic development section of our current POCD. Encourage and support shared parking agreements, encourage property owners to invest and rehabilitate in commercial structures, existing commercial structures. So I think it's, I just wanted to reemphasize the statement that Commissioner Gillette made about consistency with our POCD.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. Again, this is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. Excellent point. All right, so without any further questions or comments, okay, let me try our minds. Mr. Dumais, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Binkhurst.
Aye.
Commissioner Gillette.
Aye.
Commissioner Prestige.
Aye.
And Mr. Chairman Ahern.
Aye.
With that, Mr. Chairman, that was a unanimous recommendation of approval for Special Development District Amendment application for a Special Development District number 3.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. Again, this is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. So up next is item number 7. I put our rules and I had Todd put our rules and regulations on the meeting agenda because for a reason that has now been mooted, both Todd and I were thinking, since the last meeting went very long, having the ability to push the start of the meeting up earlier would be of some benefit. And we both got the mistaken understanding that we would have to make a change to our rules, but it turns out we do not need to make a change to our rules. So this item has been mooted, so we don't need to do an exploration of our rules at this point. So I'd ask Mr. Dumais to move on to item number 8, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Todd Dumais for the record. Next item under town planners report, we have been discussing, I think I updated everyone at our last meeting on the 13th, the changes to our outdoor dining program under, we can call it a COVID permitting process. So Executive Order number 7MM was issued by Governor Lamont that permitted a new expedited, expanded outdoor dining and also outdoor retail permitting process. What that did is outlined a number of requirements that towns must meet, and they must approve outdoor dining. Some communities throughout the state do not have outdoor dining or utilize that as an amenity to their communities. And it outlined a new process in terms of what communities can ask for people applying under this provision. And remember, this is to allow restaurants to reopen coming out of the pandemic. And it put some restrictions and requirements in place. And I don't need to go into detail with those because I discussed that at our last meeting. Since that time, we created a new permit. I think I previously had sent that to commission about 2 weeks ago, based on what that executive order authorizes us to require or ask for, and based on somewhat of other communities' permitting structures, and then also our own experience with outdoor dining. Since that time, that permit basically went live on May 19th. And we have had, I just ran the numbers today, so we've received 31 applications under this new outdoor dining permit process. And it's a administrative level review. It was designed to be very expedient and responsive to the needs of restaurants. And there are 3 different types of outdoor dining under that permit, perhaps 2. So if you have an existing outdoor dining approval from the town, you don't need to come back and go through that review and approval process as long as you are meeting all the state guidelines on social distancing requirements and health requirements related to reopening that outdoor dining. So we had a fair number of restaurants take advantage of that right off the bat that already had existing outdoor dining approvals. Many of those are in the center. So if you went around early on, you probably saw a number of restaurants that were up and running, albeit at a much lower seat and table count that were separated. But if those restaurants, or if a restaurant that did not have a previous outdoor dining permit wanted to seek approval for an outdoor dining permit or expand their current approval, they'd have to go through this new permitting process. And that's what those 31 applications that we've received. We've reviewed and approved 14. There is a local enforcement authority group of people reviewing from the health district, the building division, the public works, fire marshal's office, and the zoning enforcement officer are all looking at these. The zoning enforcement officer is the person that's spearheading the entire work. Brian Pudlick's doing a great job with this. And we're reviewing the permits and approving them as fast as we can. Under the executive order, we have 10 days or they're automatically approved. However, if they're incomplete or including things that can't be approved, we're allowed to notify them of an incomplete application or reject them. To date, we have 9 applications that either have not been accepted or rejected for incomplete information. A majority of those applications were rejected primarily because the town simultaneously was going through a public process with the merchants in the center and the restaurants to talk about how we could utilize on-street parking spaces to create outdoor dining or retail areas. And that process was a parallel track. So some of the restaurants submitted applications to use that space where the town didn't quite have the infrastructure in place, and we knew we'd have an issue with the 10-day period. So we had to reject the applications. That process should be deployed sometime this week. So you'll see some barricades, either concrete or plastic barricades that take over some amount of on-street parking spaces. And those will be made available to the restaurants or adjacent retail to then use for outdoor dining areas. And the thought is that these would be up for the full outdoor dining season. That's really where we are in the process right now. It's a total of 285 seats approved all over town. It's not just in the center. It's in some of our other commercial shopping districts in Bishop's Corner, Park Road, and down in Elmwood. But it largely mimics the work that you do as a commission when you're reviewing outdoor dining permits. It's just in a much more truncated and expedited process. And it allows things that we don't normally have the ability to approve. For instance, a restaurant can request their outdoor dining be on a nearby property, or it could be within the street. We don't have that provision currently in our ordinances. So I think that hopefully that provides a snapshot of where we are. I sent out that spreadsheet last week where we were in the process, and I can continue to send that out to the commission every week and let you know where we are in the process in terms of applications approved. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. We have a question from Ms. Gillette.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, does this also not just parking spaces on street, but this includes portions of parking lots that might be at the rear, et cetera? Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, through you to Commissioner Gillette, that is correct. So it could include, and it's all dependent on which restaurant's asking for it. It could include a parking lot provision. I know that Red Robin, for instance, as an example, recently submitted an application. And they're, I think, one of the first that we might see in town. They're getting close to an approval that'll have what I call a large wedding tent, the big white tents. That would be constructed. It would expand their existing dining area and be placed largely over some of the parking spaces in front of that establishment. So they could be on private property, or they could be within a town-owned or leased facility. So the few that come to mind are most likely in the center if there's a requests or permits in for use of outdoor dining parking spaces in those lots. And we have one application that I think just came in. It's not updated on our database, and I take that back. Today, Barcelona submitted an application, and based on the notes here, it did include the potential use of some of those parking spaces in that parking lot.
I was thinking of Park Road as well, with some of the smaller restaurants along there that may have areas in back that they could kind of the way Treva has an area in the parking lot. Some of those smaller restaurants may be able to do that. Thank you. That was my question.
Thank you, Ms. Gillette. This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. Mr. Binkhorst.
I had a question for Mr. Dumais in terms of what is the trigger for ending these special use permits, the outdoor dining? Like, is when there are no restrictions on indoor dining, or how does the end come into focus?
Mr. Chairman, through you to Commissioner Binkhorst, if I understand your question correctly, you're asking when the end for these special permits that we're issuing. Currently, that's pegged to the expiration of the current healthcare crisis. So because they're issued by executive order, when that crisis is terminated by the governor, these permits would then be, cease to be valid. Having said that, if that expiration period, I think currently is slated to end right in the beginning of September, and we know that given our New England weather, we usually have another month or two of good outdoor dining weather. The intent would be likely to keep these open through the end of the season, but if we were going to do that, we might have to make some temporary changes to our zoning to permit that with some sort of sunset clause, but that would need to be something enacted by the council through a piece of zoning ordinance amendment. Again, the governor could also just extend the order for this one particular instance through the end of the year. But part of your question, Commissioner Binkhorst, was, we've been hearing that restaurants are likely to reopen indoors within the next month or so at a reduced capacity. So this would be on top of their indoor approval authority. One thing I forgot to mention, the current outdoor special temporary applications, to take advantage of that, restaurants are capped at 50% of their indoor capacities. So they can't ask for more than 50% of their indoor capacity in any outside area. So there is a limitation function built in through the executive order. And that's actually vis-a-vis DECD guidelines through the Reopen Connecticut process.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. We have a follow-up from Mr. Binkhorst and then Ms. Gillette.
Mr. Dumais, through Chairman Ahern, is there also, what we usually have is a look-back period? Is there some ongoing assessment of these outdoor restaurant operations by the town with respect to compliance?
Mr. Chairman, through you to Commissioner Binkhorst, yes, there will be, and there is, and have been monitoring of these outdoor dining areas. The executive order authorized, a subsequent executive order actually authorized a couple of local enforcement authorities. And for outdoor dining, that authority will ultimately fall on the health department. So the health department has the authority to enforce health-related in restaurants and outdoor dining. We're under that category, along with beauty and barber salons. For other establishments, so retail establishments that open up with a 50% capacity reduction in their offices, those are going to fall under the zoning enforcement officer or in consultation with the health department. But as a team effort, I think the more eyes, our public works folks are looking at things, when we're concerned in the center, we're concerned about passage, free and clear passage throughout, keep the sidewalks open. Those are things that are constantly being monitored. And if you see issues, emailing us to report those, or if you have members of the public see those, and we have been getting people emailing their concerns in to us. So that's how they're being enforced.
Thank you, Mr. DeMay. This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. Ms. Gillette, please.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm curious as to, I'm thinking of a couple of instances, but one in particular where an outdoor dining expansion into a parking lot at the rear was denied. And would that now be possible? If they in fact can check all the boxes, are we compelled to give them the permit? When I can think of examples in previous times where we had exercised our better judgment to say no.
Mr. Chairman, through you to Commissioner Gillette, unless there is a noted safety or public safety concern by the proposal, we are essentially compelled to approve the applications. Having said that, they still need to get the property owner's authorization. So if it's our property, if they don't have that, that could be problematic, or if it's a private property, they need to provide that as well. So we can reject or disapprove applications if there are safety concerns, or have them modify those. One thing that this new special temporary outdoor dining permit process does not impart are legal non-conforming rights to any of these establishments. So to your question, if a restaurant X had some sort of expanded outdoor dining area in a adjacent parking lot, and they wanted to reestablish that next year, they're not automatically given that right. They'd have to, go through the normal permitting and application process whenever this health crisis is lifted, and then we revert back to our current special use permit process, or our administrative approval process for the smaller outdoor dining permits that are less than 4 tables or 16 chairs with no alcohol service.
This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. Ms. Gillette, follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also am wondering about some of the biggest concerns that we have about outdoor dining venues are noise and its impact on the neighbors. And we seem to spend a tremendous amount of time talking about how loud and how late the music and the lights are. What kind of considerations are being given in this permitting process for those kinds of abutter neighborhood concerns of noise and light and hours of operation?
Mr. Chairman, through you to Commissioner Gillette, one of the things that the executive order outlines and our permit, our local permit emphasizes that much like West Hartford's existing outdoor dining definition or process, it's very clear when you read the executive order in our permit that alcoholic liquor can be served in connection with outdoor dining, meaning there has to be prepared food on site. No consumer bars or alcoholic beverages served tableside unless you can't do that at all, but you have to have food on the table. Live entertainment in outdoor dining areas is not permitted at all. And then we do have some discretionary authority under our local review. If we see someone is expanding and there is a concern about neighborhood impacts, we can ask for sound information. We can ask for those things if they're relevant, lighting, sound. Largely, these are all being expanded in existing areas where they're already located. But there could be instances where that's not the case. We haven't necessarily seen them yet, but we have the ability to put some conditions and restrictions. One of the things that the executive order did do, it specified minimum times that towns have to let the outdoor dining stay open. And it's essentially through 9 p.m. Sunday through Thursday, and then Friday, Saturday up till 11 p.m. That's the minimum. Now, a town can impose, through its conditional approval, it can allow for longer hours of operation. And we're obviously using our local, no one can extend past midnight, which is what our current outdoor dining permits. But most of the establishments are not requesting that late into the evening times, largely because since they're not necessarily utilizing existing outdoor dining areas when they're creating these new spaces, there's more cost involved with lighting and keeping those areas safe. So I think the hours of operation are less than our current permittees usually have.
This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. Do we have any follow-ups? Okay, Mr. Prestige.
Commissioner Prestige, through you, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Dumais. Mr. Dumais, with a lot of the retail space in the last 10 years or so converting over to dining, hospitality in general, which has been hit exceptionally hard by this health crisis, as you characterized. A bit on the curiosity, and we'll ask you to opine, if and only if you're comfortable, what is the reaction from the restaurant community, if you can call it that, in town with regards to this being, helpful to them? And also, do you see this sort of development actually kind of effectuating a return to some success for these businesses? Again, if you're comfortable, if you'd like to dodge that one, I could appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, through you to Commissioner Prestige. I don't know that I'm qualified necessarily to answer that. We have heard mixed things from the restaurateurs, ranging from that it may not be helpful to them, but they feel they need to reopen to get staff working again, towards it might be crucial to helping them. I will point you to an NP article. I think it was Where We Live, the 9 a.m. segment. It was late last week. Chef Billy Grant was on there, and you can hear his assessment, for his restaurant in town. And there was a few other chefs on that program that I think really explored the issue that you just raised. And I would kind of defer you to, the experts, the people running the restaurants, to see how helpful or not it is. Obviously, there's a concern for restaurateurs that don't have sufficient space. If they can only get a few tables out there, I think the general consensus is it's not particularly helpful for them because they have to bring on additional staff to serve those areas. But if they can get, some critical mass of tables, then that will allow them to reopen. And once the restaurants reopen interior, even at a reduced rate, that will further help.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. Mr. Prestige, follow-up.
Commissioner Prestige, through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Dumais. And I'd just like to make a point that, Todd, that in times like this, the efforts you guys are doing, this is just one of the many things that you're doing to help the businesses in town. It just happens to be one that's on our agenda, and I know you're doing many other ones. So that no one expected to do. So I just wanted to say thank you. I know that other folks are too. Really appreciate you and your staff and in the town taking that time and investing in those success of those businesses. It's just absolutely critical as they're hit harder than anybody else. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prestige. This is Kevin Ahern again. Do we have any other questions for Mr. Dumais? Mr. Dumais?
Mr. Chairman, just as a follow-up, it's really a team effort at Town Hall, from the town manager down. I know our economic development specialist is very, very frequently discussing these matters and all business matters, as are members of our town council with the business community, to try to formulate plans to help them reopen. They even organized Zoom web calls just on this issue in and around the center, invited all the restaurateurs and the retailers to provide their opinions, because we need to learn from what we hear and try to adapt as quickly as possible, that seems to be the hardest thing, is to implement things as quickly as people need it.
This is Kevin Ahern again. I did have a question, Mr. Dumais. Could you confirm, I did see in the newspaper that LaSalle will be going down to 1 lane. Is that true? I know that there was a 2-lane and a 1-lane option.
Mr. Chairman, yes, that is correct. So the current plan, once the deployment of the on-street parking spaces, or in conjunction with that deployment, will be to change the direction of LaSalle from Arapahoe north to Farmington. So Arapahoe north of Farmington ceases to be 2-way and it becomes 1-way north. As part of that change, the remaining on-street parking spaces that are being proposed, aren't being utilized for on-street dining, would be converted to back-in angled parking. So there'll be a bit of a learning curve, but back-in angled parking is safer for